Hello everybody, welcome to this video. This year I've worked with over 1,000 students on GCSE English Language and Literature, and something very interesting happened when I was looking at English Language Paper 2, Question 2. This is a very difficult question in that the question itself doesn't really tell you what is required, which is the skill of inference, and I'm going to actually edit in a little section of a video I've already made on that at the end of this video. But what I was most shocked by when I travelled the country this year is how many students were not able to find correct differences between the two people they were asked to focus on. So I'm actually going to look at a real exam paper that you've probably tried as a mock, where source A was Jay Rayner helping his son Eddie with his maths homework, and source B was the letter that Henry sent to his father asking him if he could come home from boarding school. That's the real letter, by the way, on the right. Very interesting. Now, one of the questions here, and I hope that you can remember it, question 2 was summarize the differences between Eddie and Henry. And that was an interesting question because what a lot of students actually did, and this is something I really want you to avoid doing in the exam, what a lot of students did was they found one thing that was true about one of the people they were being asked to focus on, and then assumed that the opposite was true for the other. So for example, I saw a lot of students say, Henry has got a brother, whereas Eddie hasn't. Now that's interesting because Henry does have a brother. He writes about his brother in his letter. So that part of the answer was definitely true. But we cannot assume that Eddie doesn't have a brother. Because, okay, there's no brother mentioned in the extract, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a brother. There's no evidence to back that up. So I just want you to be really aware of the fact that when you're summarizing differences or similarities, because the question could be on similarities, probably won't be for this first year, but the exam board's paperwork does say it could be summarizing similarities or differences. But when you're summarizing differences, for example, make sure that they are actual differences between the two people that you're being asked to write about. Not just that there's one thing that is evidenced about one person and then you assume the opposite is true. So what could we say are the differences between Eddie and Henry? There are lots of things that you could have picked out in this, paper. You could say that Eddie has a relaxed, informal relationship with his father, seen through the fact that he makes jokes with him and is cheeky to him, whereas Henry has a much more formal, respectful relationship with his father, seen through the formal tone throughout his letter. That's an example where there are two differences and evidence for each side. So make sure when you're in that exam, if you're summarizing differences, that you actually pick out things that are clearly evidenced in both sources. Don't take something from one source and then just assume the opposite is true in the other. Now, listen to what I'm about to say about inference, because this is a question that assesses inference. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's not just about summarizing differences. It's about asking yourself, if this is the difference, what can I infer about what I've been asked to focus on? So let me go through that again. Really, the highest marks, as always, come in the level 4, and that's for 7 or 8 marks in this question. The key word, as always, is perceptive. Now, perceptive in this question can be a little bit misleading because it looks like summary writing is just writing in your own words the differences between the two people or whatever it is. But actually, being perceptive is using your skills of inference to actually pick out something, a difference, or to make a comment on something that isn't actually written explicitly, isn't stated explicitly in the text. It's something that you as a student have had to work out for yourself. So I'm going to show you an example of 4 different kinds of answer that would get the 4 different levels in the exam, and I'm going to apply them to the sources that are in my ebook at mrbruff.com. So if you're watching this video in isolation, it's part of a playlist. Make sure you watch the entire playlist. Please do subscribe to the channel as well, and all of this is in the ebook. But really, the level 1 response is a very simple response where we might typify this by saying that it is just a sort of simple statement of difference. Mr. Bruff has a laugh, but Mr. Thompson is serious. We obviously would say, well, that is a difference, but it's a very simple answer. Moving up to level 2, we're talking about some inference, some reading between the lines, and actually saying something that's not explicitly in the text. So what I've done is I've highlighted in yellow the bits that are the inference. Mr. Bruff is informal when he laughs, whereas Mr. Thompson is more serious. Mr. Bustley was expounding upon the formal tone shows he is serious. So the bits in yellow are actually the bits where I'm starting to infer. These bits aren't in the text. I've had to work these bits out for myself. Level 3, the sort of clear and relevant, I always think is a really solid P paragraph. Here's an example. Mr. Bruff is informal and relaxed as he often laughs and beams, showing he has a relaxed attitude to education. Mr. Thompson is more serious, using a serious tone with words like expounding upon, and the formal tone shows he's not relaxed. He takes the topic very seriously. And you can see that as you work your way through the mark bands, more of the answer becomes yellow, more of it becomes things that aren't explicitly stated, until where you get to what I would define as a level 4, a perceptive response. And you can see that most of the answer is the inference. So it's everything that went before, but it's also the extra bit here at the bottom where it says, or in fact it says, Mr. Bruff has an informal attitude as he often laughs and beams, emphasising his passion and sense of humour, and this reflects the non-controlling attitude Bruff has to education. He puts the students and their needs before himself. Thompson, however, uses a much more formal tone and vocabulary, such as expounding upon. This formal tone is used to emphasise the difference in status between himself and Mr. Woollock, to whom he writes. Thompson clearly has a defined role of authority, which he's keenly protecting and projecting in this letter. Now, let's just have a little think about that for a second. There's really a sort of approach to this question, I think, which is to pick out a point of difference, to find a quotation to back it up, but then to ask yourself, and this is the key point for perceptive, for high mark students, to ask yourself, well, if that is a difference, what does that lead me to realise about what I'm focusing on? So, okay, Mr. Bruff is informal and Mr. Thompson is formal, but it's taking it further than that and saying, what does that lead me to realise about them? Perhaps one has a non-controlling attitude to education, the other has a much more serious attitude to education, whatever it is. And it's that final stage, which I've highlighted in yellow here, that's so important. Now at mrbruff.com you're going to find all of this and more in the ebook Guide to English Language, £3.99, and I really recommend you pick up a copy. If you've not subscribed to the channel, please do that as well.